A question has come in about how to control Oriental Bittersweet. Now, Oriental Bittersweet is a vining plant that will climb up trees and it will tend to girdle the trees. So that means it will wrap around the tree and compress the outside of the bark, causing the tree to eventually die. Now, this particular plant, it looks beautiful. It's got red berries. It's got foliage. It's not as bad as kudzu, where it will overwhelm the plant and actually pull down the tree. But the slower growing, more easy to manage American bittersweet is the preferred native plant. Now, the Oriental bittersweet transfers by its berries and also cuttings. So when you're managing bittersweet, you have to be mindful that those berries are going to be eaten by birds and they're going to be moved around your property. So we want to get the plant quick and early before it goes to seed. By the way, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead, and we have management techniques for your small farm, homestead, or estate that are non-chemical methods that improve the quality of the land, that promote soil biology, and ultimately promote your own food security. So in this particular approach for the Oriental Bittersweet is to destroy the plant physically. Now, a lot of folks want to spray and pray and hope things work out, and there are conflicting methods about how to spray it. You can foliar spray, stump spray, things like that. I don't recommend those methods, and I'll share with you why here shortly. But the method I'm going to share with you today takes a little bit of time, and it's a seasonal approach that allows you to produce outputs. In the permaculture ethic, or the permaculture design, we have earth care, people care, we have turning the problems into solutions. And here what we're going to do is we're going to turn the problem of Oriental bittersweet into a solution. So first we're going to start by cutting the vines and leaving the vine in the tree to dry, because the vine spreads by the berries and it also spreads by the cuttings. So if you pull it down and you put it in a pile somewhere, it will spread in the pile. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the vines and we're going to leave it growing. We're going to leave it in the trees. Now you can pull it away from the tree a little bit. You can look at any sections where there's girding happening, and you can cut the vine at those sections. But we're going to leave it in the tree to dry. The reason we're leaving it in the tree to dry is because a dry cutting will not propagate. So you pass through, you see Japanese bittersweet, you take out your axe, you take out your saw, you take out a pair of loppers. I usually carry those things when I'm moving through the woods. You cut the vine, pull the vine off the tree a little bit, and then you come back later. Now, you're going to have new growth from what's still in the ground. So you could grab it and try to pull it out of the ground, but very often that will break the roots and cause it to sprout in new locations. You have the same problem with the honey locust. And that's why we recommend cutting the honey locust off, or pollarding the honey locust rather than cutting it off at the ground. And if you do cut it off, you cut it off at like waist high, because what we're doing, just like in the bamboo management, is we want to starve the plant of its photosynthesis. The plant needs those leaves and will continue to try to produce those leaves in order to continue to grow. So the Oriental bittersweet, and again, we want to make sure we're not cutting the American bittersweet, because the American bittersweet grows slower. It's less likely to gird a tree. The berries are food for animals in the woods. The leaves are food for your deer. So if you deer hunt, the leaves are good for the deer. The seeds are good for turkey. We don't want to destroy food sources for our wildlife. So if it's American bittersweet, you let it grow. Now you can prune it back and cut it back a little bit if you need to, but it spreads the same way. But when you've cut it off at the ground and you're coming through next season, or you're coming through later in the year, and you start seeing regrowth on the sprout or on the shoot, you need to cut that new growth before it goes to seed, before it gets to the berry form, before it gets leaves on it. And what we're doing here is continuing to stunt and shock the root system, causing it, just like in the bamboo, to suck up its starches and nutrients and really just try to force new growth. And it can't, because you keep cutting it off. Now, if you're fortunate and have good deer cover, the deer will very often eat it off at the ground because those new shoots are very nutritious. Those new shoots are edible, both to humans and to animals. And if you're going to eat them as a human, you need to cook them. So do look at it's actually a Chinese medicine. So there's herbal value to it and beneficial health value. So see, this is why we don't go spray and pray. Okay, because many of these invasive plants, so Oriental Bittersweet was brought here as an erosion control device in railroad applications. So if you've got an erosion problem on your land, you let the bittersweet grow. In fact, you might even pull the vines down and lay them flat on the ground to get that web of growth. And then now that it's flat and not going to gird the trees, you just keep running goats over top of it to keep it down. And so the root system will keep expanding into your erosion area. And then your goats will come along and eat off all the leafy brush. And then we can convert a problem into protein source on your property. So let's continue. Let's say you don't want this here. It's in a forest area. See, Oriental Bittersweet can grow in a low light situation. So you do want to pull it down in your oaks. You do want to pull it down in your other things after the vine is dried. And then we want to dig up the roots. So by digging up the roots completely or as much as possible, we're going to get the plant away from the trees. So you're going to start at the base of the tree and you're going to start pulling out the roots. And of course, you've been cutting off you don't cut it off at the ground. Cut it off at a little nub, gives you something to grab onto, and then you pull it out by the roots, and then you just keep going and over and over. Now, again, what animal eats roots and turns up soil that would cause these vines or these roots to be exposed where they would dry out and then no longer propagate? Well, pigs will do that. So if you have an area where you have a forestry application, so you have trees that maybe have another 30 years to go or another 15 years to go, you can bring your pigs through there. So you've cut the vine, you let it dry in the tree. The root system, you keep disturbing the root system with pigs. Now, you need to follow up the pigs and pick up the uprooted Oriental Bittersweet because once they uproot it, if it gets buried again, it will grow again. And if it's in a forest environment, it's not likely to dry out very quickly. So you got to pick up these roots, throw them in something, and let them dry out. Now, I always find great satisfaction and power in the situation when I pick up the invasive roots, whether it's honey locust, whether it's Oriental Bittersweet. I don't usually have to deal with the Oriental Bittersweet much. I haven't seen much of that. But the bamboo roots, those big clumps, I dry them out in the sun and then I turn them into charcoal. It's really cool when you got a bamboo stick that's exactly the way you put it in there and it's turned into charcoal in the retort. But again, I've turned it into charcoal and it absolutely isn't going to sprout then. There's no way it'll sprout after it's turned into charcoal. And then the charcoal can be fed to your animals. It can be used in your garden. It can be inoculated and then used in your garden. The charcoal could be used again for cooking. And so you have an invasive plant, and because you're not using chemicals, you can turn the plant into protein. And then now you got a new problem. You got a bunch of protein, but you can turn the dried plant roots into charcoal, and now you've got food to feed you. So this method takes a little bit longer. It's more of a systematic, holistic approach, but it does work well. So let's continue. So you've dug up the roots, you've had a soil disturbance. What do we do afterwards? We want to put in a non-feeding cover crop. So the cover crop needs to be nutrient intense. So it could be, depending on the area, if it's out in the middle if it's on the edges of the woods and it gets sunlight, it could be a cover crop with daikon radish. It could be a cover crop that grows. It just cannot be a cover crop with nitrogen fixing plants, because essentially what we're doing to the invasive in all of these methods is starving the plant of its nutrients and destroying the habitat in which the plant wishes to grow. So if we have these vines going up a tree and girding the trees, we're cutting them off at the bottom, which prevents water from getting up the tree. We're leaving the bottom open and exposed, which gravity causes the juices from the plant to aspirate from it drips out the bottom, and then it still aspirates from the leaves and then dries out completely. And then we pull the dry material down and we turn it into charcoal, We don't burn it in piles because just burning stuff, it just puts the carbon in the atmosphere. So we're going to turn it into charcoal, and then that charcoal could be crushed, spread out on the ground, which would further starve nutrients, because if you add charcoal, uninoculated charcoal, to the growth area where the plant was, it's going to suck all the nutrients out of the soil. Now, if we add grasses, we add cover crops that are nutrient hogs, that'll also suck the nutrients out of the soil. What else sucks the nutrients out of the soil is wood chips to mulch. So you can use untreated wood chips and mulch the area. So after we've had the soil disturbance, we're going to account for it by putting in non-feeding cover crops. But we can even do more. I talked about pulling the dried vines and turning them into charcoal. I talked about eating the young shoots. We can also start cutting side branching. We can do other things that are forest management techniques to remove this Oriental bittersweet. So all these things together turn our problem into a solution. What kind of solutions do we have? We have protein. We have medicine. We have charcoal that can be used either in that area. So we're almost preparing the area for something better. Because once the bittersweet is gone, we can plant some native vining plant. We can have the same aesthetic with a native vine, the American bittersweet. We can have the new crops coming in and use it as a garden area. We have healthier timber trees or healthier forests. We can also, by rotating in the livestock pressure, we can have the goats and the pigs as meat, even a crop. So see, goats love buckthorn and multifloral rose and bittersweet, almost to the point that you might feel like you want to grow these, but I warn against that. Use the goats to just solve the problem, and then eventually get into some kind of crop or grass or shrubberies that are native to your area. But that livestock pressure takes care of the successional work. Because the method I'm sharing here isn't something you go out in one day and poof, it's all gone. And by the way, spraying chemicals is not that way either. The difference is we haven't added anything to the environment. We are only taking away the surplus of the invasive and replacing it with something that's much more manageable, which is a healthy forest, livestock, and a good solid ground cover. Now, you still need to reduce the berries. So the timing is very important here. You don't want the berries to grow. And I describe in another video the method for handling the livestock. There should be a link below because this method works with kudzu as well. So Oriental bittersweet climbs trees, girds the trees. Kudzu does something similar. Both of them have edible leaves. Both of them have some medical value. But again, I want you to understand the thinking process here. And as I mentioned in the bamboo video, the first question really should be is what can eat this? If you have too much of something, what can eat this? And so now your homestead is turning problems into calories. It's turning problems into solutions by producing the more desirable product. We're either going to end up with a better forest. We're either going to end up with better soil. We're going to end up with better and healthier animals. We're going to end up with clearings in the woods where we can do things such as gardens, rather than just simply spray and poison the soil. The chemical industrial complex wants you to spray and pray because these are byproducts from the manufacturing process. They're chemicals that are very cheap to produce, and they do work. And there are times where you might use spray, but if you spray, then you can't eat it. And the chemical industrial complex is closely aligned with the pharmaceutical industrial complex, and many of these sprays, if used improperly, guarantee you get cancer. If used properly, you can avoid these problems because you're going to wear a suit, you're going to wear a respirator. I would just rather send in the goats, send in the pigs. Now the timing is important because you don't want to just root up the tree roots and have tree problems, but also the catching it before it propagates is key. You cut the vines, leave them to dry in the trees, kill off the new growth with either animal pressure or or additional cutting or eating them. Dig up and dry the roots when possible. You could do it mechanically. You can do it by manually. You could do it by the pigs. And then, of course, drying the vines and turning them into charcoal gives you the great satisfaction that you've succeeded. Charcoal is a valuable resource on your property. Um, Again, finally, don't see it as invasive. See it as new opportunity. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. This is how you remove Oriental Bittersweet, and I will attempt the Latin name of Celastrus orbiculatus, whatever. I'll put details in the description below. Anyway, visit us at www.prosperityhomestead.org, where we help you transform your land into its highest utility value, its highest expression of a healthy and natural environment, which reflects in your stewardship and blesses you with health, food security, and well-being. You can visit us at www.prosperityhomestead.org. That's all one word, where you'll get more free resources to help you manage your land, including a membership site and a newsletter that comes to your email box. You can ask questions in the comments below. That's how we get the content from any of these. But if you go to the contact page at the website at www.prosperityhomestead.org, we'll get back with you directly and give you some resources to get you started. I am so excited to hear about your successes, your permaculture projects, your holistic homesteads. Thanks for listening.